Hello and welcome everybody to today's edition of Mexico News Network's Breaking News Business here at the El Dorado Royale Spa Resort in Mexico's Riviera Maya. I'm your host, Elliot Bullman. Before we start, remember to follow us on all our social media networks, Facebook, Twitter and Google+, and catch us live on MexicoNewsNetwork.com for relevant stories and news. Let's start with the information. For the first time in 20 years, Mexico has topped the list of International Living Magazine's annual awards for best place for US citizens to retire. Yet most of them may be here illegally. South of the border, it's relatively easy for US citizens to live without legal documentation. In fact, some official reports indicate that illegal Americans seem to be the rule, not the exception. Mexicans generally embrace Americans and the influx of US dollars that follow them. Also, the Mexican government rarely deports Americans, typically just for very serious crime. Fines related to immigration paperwork can range from $50 to a few $100s. Conversely, under the Trump administration, even those people who grew up in the United States, brought there as babies or children, are being deported for lacking formal documentation. Hotspots for American immigrants, young and old alike, include cities and towns like San Miguel de Allende, Rosarito, the Valle de Guadalupe, Lake Chapala, and Ajijic. So talking about why Mexico is becoming so popular with American retirees, joining me now is Brian from Virginia. How are you doing, Brian?
Good.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
So what do you think it is? What's attracting so many retiring Americans down to Mexico?
I think it's because of the cost of living in Mexico and obviously the weather. The weather here has been beautiful. I think a lot of people come from a colder part of the United States, and even in the United States they look to move like to Florida and the southern states to retire, and I think Mexico is a really good option for them, and they enjoy the living down here and they enjoy the pace of this life.
This pace of life. I suppose economically speaking too, I mean the dollar's got really strong on the peso in recent years too. Do you think that's a factor?
Probably. I mean, obviously people that are retired live on fixed incomes, and so they don't have a whole lot of additional income over the course of their retirement. So, you know, that's always a consideration.
Yeah, so like food and even medical expenses is going to be a lot lower on fixed income in dollars down here, right?
Correct.
In my view, the strength of the dollar on the peso has made it even more affordable for Americans looking to retire in Mexico, especially over the last 10 years. The Mexican brewing industry is partying, and why not when you have such good numbers? Consumers of Corona and Dos Equis around the world are turning Mexico into a world beer power. Mexico produced 105 million hectoliters of beer in 2016, 8.1% more than the previous year, according to the country's beer chamber, surpassing Germany as the world's fourth largest producer. Hypothetically speaking, this figure would account for every person on the planet drinking 4 bottles of beer of 355 milliliters. The majority of Mexico's beer production comes from AB InBev's Grupo Modelo, which manufactures Negra Modelo and Corona, as well as Cuauhtémoc Moctezuma Heineken, which produces Tecate, Bohemia, and some Heineken. In 2016, China led global beer production with 24.2% of the world beer market, followed by the United States with 12% and Brazil with 7.4%. In my view, this success story is being driven by the fact that Mexican beer executives have figured out that it's brand-savvy millennials and the 46 million plus Hispanic market that's grown over the last 2 decades. According to Mexico's Minister for Tourism, Enrique de la Madrid Cordero, Mexico and Canada both need to look beyond the United States for trade deals to grow their economies, with territories like China, South America, and Europe. De la Madrid Cordero was in Ottawa for meetings with the federal Liberals this past week as the two countries continue to grapple with the possibility of renegotiating the NAFTA agreement later this year with US protectionists who have lashed out publicly at both continental partners. In his speech last Thursday in Mexico City, Canada's central bank governor Stephen Pelosi noted that the vast majority of Canadian and Mexican imports last year went to the United States. De La Madrid said that Mexico is doing everything possible to diversify trade, and in particular with China. It's really impressive, where there's a $60 billion trade flow, and that's despite both countries having a free trade agreement. De La Madrid Cordero also suggested the clock is working against the likelihood of a sweeping overhaul of NAFTA, but he said there are areas of opportunity for modernizing this trade agreement. The timing of next year's presidential elections in Mexico, plus the mandatory consultation period in the United States, means there's a relatively short window, essentially 3 months at the end of the year, to make changes to NAFTA. This was all for today. Thank you for your company here at the El Dorado Royale Spa Resort in Mexico's Riviera Maya. I'm your host, Elliot Bullman. Before we go, don't forget to check out all our social media networks, Facebook, Twitter and Google+, and catch us live on MexicoNewsNetwork.com for more information about Mexico and the world. Until next time.